friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell you a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems. The ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Now, many podcasts put their self-promotion and appeals for help halfway through or even towards the end. But because I'm hoping you're asleep before we get there, I need to put the stuff up front. The show is brought to you, as always, with the help of the supporters on Patreon. There are a lot of people I'm hearing from more and more often how valuable they find the show, and those supporters who have the means to help fund it, to keep it going, and help me to reach new audiences are very much appreciated. So if you're making use of Sleepy Time Tales all the time to help you to deal with sleeplessness, and you have the urge to support the show, and most importantly, if you have the means, please check out patreon.com/sleepytimetales, where you can take a link in the show notes or go from the website. The main benefit is you will have the satisfaction of knowing that you're contributing to the rest and lifestyle improvement of thousands of people, and over and above that, there are real rewards available from as little as $2 a month. There are early releases of the weekly episode, as well as weekly bonus episodes and special edits of the main show. So if you don't like the music or you don't like the intro or something like that, you can throw a little something in the bucket and avoid all of that stuff. Other methods of supporting the show, if committing to a monthly payment is a little bit much for you, there's also the tip jar, the merchandise store, and other ways to help. Because while financial help is great, another huge way to help the show is simply to spread the word. If there is someone else in your life who you think will benefit from listening to Sleepy Time Tales, just let them know. If you recommend the show on social media, make sure to tag me in so that I can see and I can thank you. That would be at Sleepy Time Tales on Instagram or Twitter. Speaking of which, I want to thank Giselle229, who recommended the podcast recently on Instagram, who says it has helped her from the first time she listened. Thanks very much, Giselle, and I hope your friends and followers find the show as helpful as you do. Last but not least, of course, I've got to shout out the music, which the song is Un Désert by Kumiku. Their music is available on the website at loyaltyfreemusic.com, and there's a lot of very cool stuff up there, and they're various different styles, and most of it is free to use for creative projects. So if you're a podcaster or have a YouTube video or something like a YouTube video series or something like that, there could very well be something handy there for you as well. So I've also linked their website in the show notes, and you can go take a look, because I do recommend checking them out. Thank you very much for taking the time. Yeah, and back to the show. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales? What is it for? This strange idea, this podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to. But lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast that is intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night, with your mind spinning and emotions in turmoil with anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. I'm someone who has struggled to sleep ever since I was a baby. My parents had sleepless nights with me for years, and even once I got old enough not to bother them anymore, sleep was always a struggle for me. A lot of people I knew liked sleeping with the TV or the radio on, but it was something I resisted, thinking that I would sleep more easily in silence. But I discovered that when I tried listening to podcasts at night, that the droning voices of the people on them actually did have a tendency to act like a sedative for me. Turns out the sound of voices was very relaxing to me, but podcasts didn't have the disturbing light or advertising of the TV or the music or very loud ads that were played on the radio at night. Podcasts tend to be all pretty even volume as you go through, so it makes it much more relaxing to me. I started listening to podcasts. Well, I discovered it when I was trying to listen to things at night because I thought I was going to be lying awake. But then I started listening to podcasts specifically to help me sleep. And then I eventually discovered that there are some out there specifically designed for that purpose. I tried one or two that I recommended to others, but they sometimes didn't work out. For various reasons, they didn't resonate. Sometimes the narrator's voice or the sort of type of story they told or something like that. So I thought to myself, I've got this boring, deep, drony voice. Let me see if I can use it to try and reach others that the other sleep podcasts couldn't. Now, every episode starts with this long intro. It is here for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I need to explain the structure to new listeners. I need to kind of make the case for why I think it might be useful for you to spend your time listening to this, why I think it might be helpful to you to give me the chance. And also for people who've been listening to the show quite a while, it has a secondary purpose. Because what we're trying to do here is we're trying to create new habits. Insomnia is a bad habit of sorts, and we're trying to create new ones. This intro, which usually goes on for about 15 minutes, is it's a chance for people to start preparing themselves for sleep. To calm your mind down before the story arrives so that when the story gets here, there's actually less sort of pressure to help you sleep. Now's the time to, if you haven't already, grab a drink of water, brush your teeth, snuggle yourself under your covers, make sure your environment is not too hot. A slightly cooler environment is actually good for sleeping. And prepare yourself, because we're building a space together, a little nest or a little cabin in the woods, whatever you feel comfortable with. That's something you're going to settle into. Now, for me, there's a couple of different possible ways you can engage with the show. For me, I need something to focus on. I need a story or an event that lets me keep my mind on a specific point, to stop it from spinning out into stresses and anxieties, which are my enemies of a good night's sleep. I need to focus just enough not to resist the embrace of sleep when it comes for me. Some people might be after something a little bit more primal. Maybe you just need a background, some kind of white noise. Some people like the sound of rain or the sound of the ocean or wind in the trees, and maybe for you, some droning deep voice is really what you need for. Tonight we're returning to Little Women, picking up where we left off a couple of months ago now, I think. It's been quite a while since we originally told this story. I think it was actually quite early in the lockdown phase. But what is time at the moment? I can't remember. I do think it was roughly, I don't even know, 20 more episodes ago. One thing that I never quite realized, because when I grew up, I never really liked a lot of classic novels. And as I'm going through doing this show, I'm learning stuff that maybe I should have known when I was younger. One thing I had struggled at some stages to read this in a calm way, because it is a surprisingly funny book. I was really, really amazed by it. I always kind of had a sense it was a dour and serious thing, but there's some really good snickers in here. I had to redo a few bits where I was laughing over. But yeah, it's a good fun book, and I definitely recommend anyone who wants to actually get through it without falling asleep actually gives it the whole thing a try. But as we go through the story tonight, it's very important that you don't fall asleep. Just keep a light mental grip on the thread of the story as I'm telling it to you, and allow the need for sleep to come for you. Now, obviously, I'm hoping that you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, but it is very important that you don't feel pressurized, especially if you're new to the show. It's very possible, in fact, likely even, that this will take a good couple of nights to work for you. I suggest giving it a solid 3 nights of trying just to see if it works. You may need to get used to my voice, or my slightly strange accent, or even just the idea of having some strange guy talk to you while you're trying to sleep. You don't know that you can trust me. I mean, I can tell you that you can, but you may need to learn that firsthand before you can, and that's fine. It's also possible that, especially early on, one episode just isn't long enough. In fact, what I do with my sleep podcasts is I queue up a few episodes. I keep a whole bunch downloaded, and then I start with the latest one when I go to sleep and let that run, and then I'll usually fall asleep quite quickly. But then during the course of the night, I usually wake up at around 3 a.m., and when that happens, if that happens, then I just pop the earbuds back in, because they've usually fallen out at that stage, and waft back to sleep on those voices. Another tendency I have a bit occasionally is I wake up sometimes a little bit before my alarm, 30 minutes or 60 minutes before I'm due to wake up. And I do the exact same thing. At first it may sound a little bit strange to even bother. Why would you go to sleep 60 minutes or 30 minutes or less even before your alarm goes? And I've got to tell you, I don't know exactly what it is, but there's something about allowing yourself deep relaxation right before the alarm goes that is satisfying on a deep, deep level. But it's very important that whether you're trying to get to sleep in the night or waking up in the middle of the night or waking up when the sun's peeking out and the alarm's not quite ready to go off, that you try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, this may seem strange to you. In fact, I'd be very surprised if it doesn't. So give it a chance and relax into it. Because that's the basic idea. You relax and you lie in the dark, and while you do that, I tell you a tale. So relax, dear listener, my nighttime friend who has elected to lie in the dark, listening to my voice. You will always be safe with me, because I'm here to help you relax, to improve your life in a small way, or maybe not so small. People don't sleep very well these days, and it makes their lives harder. So I'm here to do my small part to help you in a big way. To help you to face tomorrow and the day after, well rested and better able to cope and process. I believe very strongly in the benefits of kindness. I want to be kind to you. I want to share kindness with you. But most importantly, the most important thing of all is I need you to be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up or rebuke yourself over not sleeping. Don't get tense if you just can't get yourself over the edge of sleep, even with me here in your ears trying to help. Frustration is one of the great enemies of a good night's sleep, and the intention with this podcast is to short-circuit that frustration, to distract the feeling we get when we blame ourselves for not being able to let go and drift into the dark. So take a breath. Forgive the fact that you can't sleep and let my voice wash over you. Take another breath. Imagine the warm darkness rising up, inviting you to sleep and to a better life starting tomorrow. And if you can't let go, forgive yourself and try again tomorrow. If you've had a life of insomnia, sleep is something like an enemy. But it is not your enemy. It's a natural process that we've been pulled away from by stress and life, and progress shining bright lights in our eyes at all hours. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course, you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. This week we return to Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Chapter 3. The Lawrence Boy. "Joe, Joe, where are you?" cried Meg at the foot of the garret stairs. "Here," answered a husky voice from above, and running up, Meg found her sister eating apples and crying over the air of Redcliffe, wrapped up in a comforter on an old three-legged sofa by the sunny window. This was Jo's favourite refuge, and here she loved to retire with half a dozen russets and a nice book, to enjoy the quiet and the society of a pet rat who lived nearby and didn't mind her a particle. As Meg appeared, Scrabble whisked into his hole. Jo shook the tears off her cheeks and waited to hear the news. Such fun, only see. A regular note of invitation from Mrs. Gardiner for tomorrow night, cried Meg, waving the precious paper, and then proceeding to read it with girlish delight. Mrs. Gardiner would be happy to see Miss March and Miss Josephine at a little dance on New Year's Eve. Mommy is willing we should go. Now what shall we wear? What's the use of that, when you know we shall wear our poplins because we haven't got anything else, answered Jo with her mouth full. If only I had a silk, sighed Meg. Mother says I may when I'm 18 perhaps, but 2 years is an everlasting time to wait. I'm sure our pops look like silk and they're nice enough for us. Yours is as good as new, but I forgot the burn and tear in mine. Whatever shall I do? The burn shows badly and I can't take any out. You must sit still all you can and keep your back out of sight. The front is all right. I shall have a new ribbon for my hair and Mommy will lend me her little pearl pin and my new slippers are lovely and my gloves will do, although they aren't as nice as I'd like. Mine are spoiled with lemonade and I can't get any new ones, so I shall have to go without, said Jo, who never troubled herself much about dress. You must have gloves or I won't go, cried Meg decidedly. Gloves are more important than anything else. You can't dance without them, and if you don't, I should be so mortified. Then I'll stay still. I don't care much for company dancing. It's no fun to go sailing around. I like to fly about and cut capers. You can't ask Mother for new ones, they're so expensive, and you're so careless. She said when you spoiled the others that she wouldn't get you any more this winter. Can't you make them do? I can hold them crumpled up in my hand so no one will know how stained they are, that's all I can do. No, I'll tell you how we can manage. Each wear one good one and carry a bad one, don't you see? Your hands are bigger than mine, and you will stretch my glove dreadfully, began Meg, whose gloves were a tender point with her. Then I'll go without. I don't care what people say, cried Jo, taking up her book. You may have it, you may, only don't stain it, and do behave nicely. Don't put your hands behind you or stare or say Christopher Columbus, will you? Don't worry about me. I'll be as prim as I can and not get into any scrapes if I can help it. Now go and answer your notes and let me finish the splendid story. So Meg went away to accept with thanks, look over her dress and sing blithely as she did up her real one-lace frill. While Jo finished her story, her 4 apples, and had a game of romps with Scrabble. On New Year's Eve the parlour was deserted, for the 2 younger girls played dressing maids, and the 2 elder were absorbed in the all-important business of getting ready for the party. Simple as the toilets were, there was a great deal of running up and down, laughing and talking, and at one time a strong smell of burned hair pervaded the house. Meg wanted a few curls about her face, and Jo undertook to pinch the papered locks with a pair of hot tongs. Ought they to smoke like that? Asked Beth from her perch on the bed. It's the dampness drying, replied Jo. What a queer smell. It's like burnt feathers, observed Amy, smoothing her own pretty curls with a superior air. There, now I'll go take off the papers and you'll see a cloud of little ringlets, said Jo, putting down the tongs. She did take off the papers, but no cloud of ringlets appeared, for the hair came with the papers, and the horrified hairdresser laid a row of little scorched bundles on the bureau before her victim. Oh, what have you done? I'm spoiled, I can't go. My hair, oh my hair, wailed Meg, looking with despair at the uneven frizzle on her forehead. Just my luck. You shouldn't have asked me to do it. I always spoil everything. I'm so sorry, but the tongs were too hot, and so I've made a mess, groaned poor Joe, regarding the little black pancakes with tears of regret. It isn't spoiled. Just frizzle it and tie a ribbon so the ends come on your forehead a bit, and it'll look like the last fashion. I've seen many girls do it, said Amy consolingly. Serves me right for trying to be fine. I wish I'd let my hair alone, cried Meg petulantly. So do I. It was smooth and pretty. But it will soon grow out again, said Beth, coming to kiss and comfort the shorn sheep. After various lesser mishaps, Meg was finished at last, and by the united exertions of the entire family, Joe's hair was got up and her dress on. They looked very well in their simple suits, Meg's in silvery drab with a blue velvet snood, lace frills and the pearl pin, Joe in maroon with a stiff, gentlemanly linen collar and a white chrysanthemum or two for her only ornament. Each put on one nice light glove and carried one soiled one, and all pronounced the effect quite easy and fine. Meg's high-heeled slippers were very tight and hurt her, though she would not own it, and Joe's 19 hairpins all seemed stuck straight into her head, which was not exactly comfortable, but dear me, let us be elegant or die. Have a good time, dearie, said Mrs. March, as the sisters went daintily down the walk. Don't eat much supper and come away at 11 when I send Hannah for you. As the gate clashed behind them, a voice cried out from a window. Girls, girls, have you both got nice pocket handkerchiefs? Yes, yes, bandy nice, and Meg has cologne on hers, cried Joe, adding with a laugh as they went on. I do believe Mommy would ask that if we were all running away from an earthquake. It is one of her aristocratic tastes, and quite proper, for a real lady is always known by neat boots, gloves, and handkerchief, replied Meg, who had a good many little aristocratic tastes of her own. Now don't forget to keep the bad breadth out of sight, Joe. Is my sash right? And does my hair look very bad? Said Meg, as she turned from the glass in Mrs. Gardner's dressing room after a prolonged prink. I know I shall forget. If you see me doing anything wrong, just remind me by a wink, will you? Returned Joe, giving her collar a twitch and her head a hasty brush. No, winking isn't ladylike. I'll lift my eyebrows if anything is wrong, and nod if you're all right. Now hold your shoulders straight and take short steps, and don't shake hands if you're introduced to anyone. It isn't the thing. How do you learn all the proper ways? I never can. Isn't that music gay? Down they went, feeling a trifle timid, for they seldom went to parties, and informal as this little gathering was, it was an event to them. Mrs. Gardner, a stately old lady, greeted them kindly and handed them over to the eldest of her 6 daughters. Meg knew Sally and was at her ease very soon. But Jo, who didn't care much for girls or girlish gossip, stood about with her back carefully against the wall, and felt as much out of place as a colt in a flower garden. Half a dozen jovial lads were talking about skates in another part of the room, and she longed to go and join them, for skating was one of the joys of her life. She telegraphed her wish to Meg, but the eyebrows went up so alarmingly that she dared not stir. No one came to talk to her, and one by one the group dwindled away until she was left alone. She could not roam about and amuse herself, for the burnt breath would show, so she stared at people rather forlornly till the dancing began. Meg was asked at once, and the tight slippers tripped about so briskly that none would have guessed the pain the wearers suffered smilingly. Jo saw a big red-headed youth approaching her corner, and fearing he meant to engage her, she slipped into a curtained recess, intending to peep and enjoy herself in peace. Unfortunately, another bashful person had chosen the same refuge, for, as the curtain fell behind her, she found herself face to face with the Lawrence boy. "Dear me, I didn't know anyone was here," stammered Jo, preparing to back out as speedily as she had bounced in. But the boy laughed and said pleasantly, though he looked a little startled, "Don't mind me. Stay if you like." "Shan't I disturb you?" "Not a bit. I only came here because I don't know many people and felt rather strange at first, you know." "So did I. Don't go away, please, unless you'd rather." The boy sat down again and looked at his pumps, till Joe said, trying to be polite and easy, "I think I've had the pleasure of seeing you before. You live near us, don't you?" "Next door." And you looked up and laughed outright, for Joe's prim manner was rather funny when he remembered how they had chatted about cricket when he brought the cat home. That put Joe at her ease, and she laughed too, as she said in her heartiest way, "We did have such a good time over your nice Christmas present. Grandpa said it. But you put it into his head, didn't you now?" "How was your cat, Miss March?" asked the boy, trying to look sober while his black eyes shone with fun. "Nicely, thank you, Mr. Lawrence, but I am not Miss March. I'm only Joe," returned the young lady. "I'm not Mr. Lawrence. I'm only Laurie." "Laurie Lawrence? What an odd name." "My first name is Theodore, but I don't like it, for the fellows called me Dora, so I made them say Laurie instead." "I hate my name too, so sentimental. I wish everyone would say Joe instead of Josephine." "How did you make the boy stop calling you Dora?" "I thrashed him." "I can't thrash Aunt March, so I suppose I shall have to bear it." And Joe resigned herself with a sigh. "Don't you like to dance, Miss Joe?" asked Laurie, looking as if he thought the name suited her. "I like it well enough if there's plenty of room and everyone is lively. In a place like this, I'm sure to upset something, tread on people's toes, or do something dreadful. So I keep out of mischief and let Meg sail about. Don't you dance?" "Sometimes. You see, I've been abroad a good many years and haven't been into company enough yet to know how you do things here." "Abroad?" cried Joe. "Oh, tell me about it. I love dearly to hear people describe their travels." Laurie didn't seem to know where to begin, but Joe's eager questions soon set him going, and he told her how he had been at a school in Vevey where the boys never wore hats and had a fleet of boats on the lake, and for holiday fun went on walking trips around Switzerland with their teachers. "Don't I wish I'd been there," cried Joe. "Did you go to Paris?" "We spent last winter there." "Can you talk French?" "We were not allowed to speak anything else at Vevey." "Do say some. I can read it, but I can't pronounce. Quel nom est cette jeune demoiselle en pantoufles jolies?" "How nicely you do it. Let me see. You said, 'Who is the young lady in the pretty slippers,' didn't you?" "Oui, mademoiselle." "It's my sister Margaret, and you knew it was." "Do you think she's pretty?" "Yes. She makes me think of the German girls. She looks so fresh and quiet and dances like a lady." Joe quite glowed with pleasure at this boyish praise of her sister, and stored it up to repeat to Meg. Both peeped and criticized and chatted till they felt like old acquaintances. Laurie's bashfulness soon wore off, for Joe's gentlemanly demeanour amused and set him at his ease, and Joe was her merry self again, because her dress was forgotten and nobody lifted their eyebrows at her. She liked the Lawrence boy better than ever, and took several good looks at him, so that she might describe him to the girls, for they had no brothers, very few male cousins, and boys were almost unknown creatures to them. Curly black hair, brown skin, big black eyes, handsome nose, fine teeth, small hands and feet. Taller than I am, very polite for a boy, and altogether jolly. Wonder how old he is. It was on the tip of Joe's tongue to ask, but she checked herself in time, and with unusual tact tried to find out in a roundabout way. "I suppose you're going to college soon. I see you pegging away at your books. No, I mean studying hard." And Joe blushed at the dreadful pegging which had escaped her. Laurie smiled, but didn't seem shocked, and answered with a shrug. "Not for a year or two. I won't go before 17 anyway." Aren't you but 15? Asked Joe, looking at the tall lad with whom she had imagined 17 already. 16 next month. How I wish I was going to college. You don't look as if you liked it. I hate it. Nothing but grinding or skylarking, and I don't like the way fellows do either in this country. What do you like? To live in Italy and to enjoy myself in my own way. Joe wanted very much to ask what his own way was, but his black brows looked rather threatening as he knit them, so she changed the subject by saying, as her foot get time, "That's a splendid polka. Why don't you go and try it?" "If you will come too," he answered, with a gallant little bow. "I can't, for I told Meg I wouldn't because—" There Joe stopped and looked undecided whether to tell or to laugh. "Because what? You won't tell?" "Never." "Well, I have a bad trick of standing before the fire, and so I burn my frocks, and I scorched this one. And although it's nicely mended, it shows, and Meg told me to keep still so no one would see it. You may laugh if you want to. It is funny, I know." But Laurie didn't laugh. He only looked down a minute, and the expression on his face puzzled Joe when he said very gently, "Never mind that. I'll tell you how we can manage. There's a long hall out there, and we can dance grandly, and no one will see us. Please come." Joe thanked him and gladly went, wishing she had 2 neat gloves when she saw the nice bull-coloured ones her partner wore. The hall was empty, and they had a grand polka, for Laurie danced well and taught her the German step, which delighted Joe, being full of swing and spring. When the music stopped, they sat down on the stairs to get their breath, and Laurie was in the midst of an account of a students' festival at Heidelberg, when Meg appeared in search of her sister. She beckoned, and Joe reluctantly followed her into a side room where she found her on a sofa, holding her foot and looking pale. "I've sprained my ankle. The stupid high heel turned and gave me a sad wrench. It aches so I can hardly stand, and I don't know how I'm ever going to get home," she said, rocking to and fro in pain. "I knew you'd hurt your feet in those silly shoes. I'm sorry, but I don't see what you can do except get a carriage or stay here all night," answered Joe, softly rubbing the poor ankle as she spoke. "I can't have a carriage without it costing ever so much. I dare say I can't get one at all, for most people come in their own, and it's a long way to the stable and no one to send." "I'll go." "No, indeed. It's past 9 and dark as Egypt. I can't stop here, for the house is full. Sally has some girls staying with her. I'll rest till Hannah comes, and then I'll do the best I can." "I'll ask Laurie. He will go," said Joe, looking relieved as the idea occurred to her. "Mercy, no. Don't ask or tell anyone. Get me my rubbers and put these slippers with our things. I can't dance any more, but as soon as supper is over, watch for Hannah and tell me the minute she comes." "They're going out to supper now. I'll stay with you, I'd rather." "No, dear, run along and bring me some coffee. I'm so tired I can't stir." So Meg reclined, with rubbers well hidden, and Joe went blundering away to the dining room, which she found after going into a china closet and opening the door of a room where old Mr. Gardner was taking a little private refreshment. Making a dart at the table, she secured the coffee, which she immediately spilled, thereby making the front of her dress as bad as the back. "Oh dear, what a blunderbuss I am," exclaimed Joe, finishing Meg's glove by scrubbing her gown with it. "Can I help you?" said a friendly voice, and there was Laurie, with a full cup in one hand and a plate of ice in the other. "I was trying to get something for Meg, who is very tired, and someone shook me, and here I am in a nice state," answered Joe, glancing dismally from the stained skirt to the coffee-coloured glove. "Too bad. I was looking for someone to give this to. May I take it to your sister?" "Oh, thank you. I'll show you where she is. I don't offer to take it myself, for I could only get into another scrape if I did." Joe led the way, and as if used to waiting on ladies, Laurie drew up a little table, brought a second installment of coffee and ice for Joe, and was so obliging that even particular Meg, pronounced him a nice boy. They had a merry time over the bonbons and mottos and were in the midst of a quiet game of buzz, with 2 or 3 other young people who had strayed in, when Hannah appeared. Meg forgot her foot and rose so quickly that she was forced to catch hold of Joe with an exclamation of pain. "Hush, don't say anything," she whispered, adding aloud, "It's nothing. I turned my foot a little, that's all," and limped upstairs to put her things on. Hannah scolded, Meg cried, and Joe was at her wit's end till she decided to take things into her own hands. Slipping out, she ran down and, finding a servant, asked if he could get her a carriage. It happened to be a hired waiter who knew nothing about the neighborhood, and Joe was looking around for help when Laurie, who had heard what she said, came up and offered his grandfather's carriage, which had just come for him, he said. "It's so early. You can't mean to go yet," began Joe, looking relieved but hesitating to accept the offer. "I always go early, I do, truly. Please let me take you home. It's all on my way, you know, and it rains, they say." That settled it, and telling him of Meg's mishap, Joe gratefully accepted and rushed up to bring down the rest of the party. Hannah hated rain as much as a cat does, so she made no trouble, and they rolled away in a luxurious close carriage, feeling very festive and elegant. Laurie went on the box so Meg could keep her foot up, and the girls talked over their party in freedom. "I had a capital time, did you?" asked Joe, rumpling up her hair and making herself comfortable. "Yes, till I hurt myself. Sally's friend Annie Moffat took a fancy to me and asked me to come and spend a week with her when Sally does. She's going in the spring when the opera comes, and it will be perfectly splendid." "If Mother only lets me go," answered Meg, cheering up at the thought. "I saw you dancing with the red-headed man I ran away from. Was he nice?" "Oh, very. His hair is auburn, not red, and he was very polite, and I had a delicious redowa with him." "He looked like a grasshopper in a fit. When did he learn the new step? Laurie and I couldn't help laughing. Did you hear us?" "No, but it was very rude." "What were you about all that time, hidden away there?" Joe told her adventures, and by the time she had finished, they were at home. With many thanks they said good night and crept in, hoping to disturb no one. But the instant their door creaked, 2 little nightcaps bobbed up, and 2 sleepy but eager voices cried out, "Tell about the party, tell about the party." With what Meg called a great want of manners, Joe had saved some bonbons for the little girls, and they soon subsided after hearing the most thrilling events of the evening. "I declare it really seems like being a fine young lady to come home from the party in a carriage and sit in my dressing gown with a maid to wait on me," said Meg, as Joe bound up her foot with arnica and brushed her hair. "I don't believe fine young ladies enjoy themselves a bit more than we do, in spite of our burned hair, old gowns, 1 glove apiece, and tight slippers that sprain our ankles when we are silly enough to wear them." And I think Joe was quite right. Chapter 4. Burdens. "Oh dear, how hard does it seem to take up our packs and go on," sighed Meg the morning after the party. For now the holidays were over, the week of merrymaking did not fit her for going on easily with a task she never liked. "I wish it was Christmas or New Year's all the time. Wouldn't it be fun?" answered Joe, yawning dismally. "We shouldn't enjoy ourselves half as much as we do now. But it does seem so nice to have little suppers and bouquets and go to parties and drive home and rest and read and not work. It's like other people, you know, and I always envy girls who do such things." "I'm so fond of luxury," said Meg, trying to decide which of 2 shabby gowns was the least shabby. "Well, we can't have it, so don't let us grumble, but shoulder our bundles and trudge along as cheerfully as Marmee does. I'm sure Aunt March is a regular old man of the sea to me, but I suppose when I've learned to carry her without complaining, she will tumble off or get so light that I shan't mind her." This idea tickled Joe's fancy and put her in good spirits. But Meg didn't brighten, for her burden, consisting of 4 spoiled children, seemed heavier than ever. She had not heart enough to make herself pretty as usual by putting on a blue neck ribbon and dressing her hair in the most becoming way. What's the use of looking nice when no one sees me but these cross midgets? And no one cares whether I'm pretty or not, she muttered, shutting her drawer with a jerk. I shall have to toil and moil all my days with only little bits of fun now and then, and get old and ugly and sour because I'm poor and I can't enjoy my life as other girls do. It's a shame. So Meg went down, wearing an injured look, and wasn't at all agreeable at breakfast time. Everyone seemed rather out of sorts and inclined to croak. Beth had a headache and lay on the sofa, trying to comfort herself with a cat and 3 kittens. Amy was fretting because her lessons were not learned and she couldn't find her rubbers. Joe would whistle and make a great racket getting ready. Mrs. March was very busy trying to finish a letter which must go at once, and Hannah had the grumps for being up late didn't suit her. There was never such a cross family, cried Jo, losing her temper when she had upset an inkstand, broken both boot-lacings, and sat down upon her hat. You're the crossest person in it, returned Amy, washing out the sum that was wrong with all the tears that had fallen on her slate. Beth, if you don't keep these horrid cats down cellar, I'll have them drowned, exclaimed Meg angrily, as she tried to get rid of the kitten which had scrambled up her back and stuck like a burr just out of reach. Jo laughed, Meg scolded, Beth implored, and Amy wailed because she couldn't remember how much 9 times 12 was. Girls, do be quiet 1 minute. I must get this off by early mail, and you drive me distracted with your worry, cried Mrs. March, crossing out the 3rd spoiled sentence in her letter. There was a momentary lull, broken by Hannah, who stalked in, laid 2 hot turnovers on the table, and stalked out again. These turnovers were an institution, and the girls called them muffs, for they had no others and found the hot pies very comforting to their hands on a cold morning. Hannah never forgot to make them, no matter how busy or grumpy she might be, for the walk was long and bleak. The poor things got no other lunch and were seldom home before 2. Cuddle your cats and get over your headache, Bethy. Goodbye, Mommy. We're a set of rascals this morning, but we'll come home regular angels. Now then, Meg. And Jo tramped away, feeling that the pilgrims were not setting out as they ought to. They always looked back before turning the corner, for their mother was always at the window to nod and smile and wave her hand to them. Somehow it seemed as if they couldn't have got through the day without that, for whatever their mood might be, that last glimpse of that motherly face was sure to affect them like sunshine. If Mommy shook her fist instead of kissing her hand to us, it would serve us right. For more ungrateful wretches than we are were never seen, cried Jo, taking a remorseful satisfaction in the snowy walk and bitter wind. Don't use such dreadful expressions, replied Meg, from the depths of the veil in which she had shrouded herself like a nun sick of the world. I like good strong words that mean something, replied Jo, catching her hat as it took a leap off her head preparatory to flying away altogether. Call yourself any names you like, but I am neither a rascal nor a wretch, and I don't choose to be called so. You're a blighted being and decidedly cross today because you can't sit in the lap of luxury all the time. Poor dear, just wait till I make my fortune and you shall revel in carriages and ice cream and high-heeled slippers and posies and red-headed boys to dance with. How ridiculous you are, Jo. But Meg laughed at the nonsense and felt better in spite of herself. Lucky for you I am, for if I put on crushed airs and try to be dismal as you do, we should be in a nice state. Thank goodness I can always find something funny to keep me up. Don't croak any more, but come home jolly, there's a dear. Jo gave her sister an encouraging pat on the shoulder as they parted for the day, each going a different way, each hugging her little warm turnover, and each trying to be cheerful, in spite of the wintry weather, hard work, and the unsatisfied desires of pleasure-loving youth. When Mr. March lost his property in trying to help an unfortunate friend, the two oldest girls begged to be allowed to do something toward their own support at least. Believing that they could not begin too early to cultivate energy, industry, and independence, their parents consented, and both fell to work with the very good will which, in spite of all obstacles, is sure to succeed at last. Margaret found a place as nursery governess and felt rich with her small salary. As she said, she was fond of luxury, and her chief trouble was poverty. She found it harder to bear than the others, because she could remember a time when the home was beautiful, life full of ease and pleasure, and want of any kind unknown. She tried not to be envious or discontented, but it was very natural that the young girl should long for pretty things, gay friends, accomplishments, and a happy life. At the King's she daily saw all she wanted, for the children's older sisters were just out, and Meg caught frequent glimpses of dainty ball dresses and bouquets, heard lively gossip about theatres, concerts, sleighing parties, and merrymakings of all kinds, and saw money lavished on trifles which would have been so precious to her. Poor Meg seldom complained, but a sense of injustice made her feel bitter towards everyone sometimes, for she had not yet learned to know how rich she was in the blessings which alone can make life happy. Jo happened to suit Aunt March, who was lame and needed an active person to wait upon her. The childless old lady had offered to adopt one of the girls when the troubles came, and was much offended because her offer was declined. Other friends told the Marches that they had lost all chance of being remembered in the rich old lady's will, but the unworldly Marches only said, "We can't give about girls for a dozen fortunes. Rich or poor, we will keep together and be happy in one another." The old lady wouldn't speak to them for a time, but happened to meet Jo at a friend's. Something in her comical face and blunt manners struck the old lady's fancy, and she proposed to take her for a companion. This did not suit Jo at all, but she accepted the place since nothing better appeared, and to everyone's surprise got on remarkably well with her irascible relative. There was an occasional tempest, and once Jo marched home declaring she couldn't bear it any longer. But Aunt March always cleared up quickly and sent for her to come back again with such urgency that she could not refuse, for in her heart she rather liked the peppery old lady. I suspect that the real attraction was a large library of fine books, which was left to dust and spiders since Uncle March died. Jo remembered the kind old gentleman who used to let her build railroads and bridges with his big dictionaries, tell her stories about queer pictures in his Latin books, and buy her cards of gingerbread whenever he met her in the street. The dim, dusty room with the bust staring down from the tall bookcases, the cozy chairs, the globes, and best of all, the wilderness of books in which she could wander where she liked, made the library a region of bliss to her. The moment Aunt March took her nap or was busy with company, Jo hurried to this quiet place, and curling herself up in the easy chair, devoured poetry, romance, history, travels, and pictures like a regular bookworm. But like all happiness, it did not last long, for as sure as she had just reached the part of the story, the sweetest verse of a song, or the most perilous adventure of her traveller, a shrill voice called "Josephine, Josephine," and she had to leave her paradise to wind yarn, wash the poodle, or read Belsham's essays by the hour together. Jo's ambition was to do something very splendid. What it was she had no idea as yet, but left it for time to tell her, and meanwhile found her greatest affliction in the fact that she couldn't read, run, and ride as much as she liked. A quick temper, sharp tongue, and restless spirit were always getting her into scrapes, and her life was a series of up and downs, which were both comic and pathetic. But the training she received at Aunt March's was just what she needed, and the thought that she was doing something to support herself made her happy, in spite of the perpetual Josephine. Beth was too bashful to go to school. It had been tried, but she suffered so much that it was given up, and she did her lessons at home with her father. Even when he was away and her mother called to devote her skill and energy to soldiers' aid societies, Beth went faithfully on by herself and did the best she could. She was a housewifely little creature and helped Hannah keep home neat and comfortable for the workers, never thinking of any reward but to be loved. Long, quiet days she spent, not lonely or idle, for her little world was peopled with imaginary friends, and she was by nature a busy bee. There were 6 dolls to be taken up and dressed every morning, for Beth was a child still and loved her pets as well as ever. Not one whole or handsome one among them. All were outcasts till Beth took them in. For when her sisters outgrew these idols, they passed to her because Amy would have nothing old or ugly. Beth cherished them all the more tenderly for that very reason and set up a hospital for the infirm dolls. No pins were ever stuck into their cotton vitals, no harsh words or blows were ever given them, no neglect ever saddened the heart of the most repulsive, but all were fed and clothed, nursed and caressed with an affection which never failed. One forlorn fragment of dollarity had belonged to Jo, and having led a tempestuous life was left a wreck in the rag bag, from which dreary poorhouse it was rescued by Beth and taken to her refuge. Having no top to its head, she tied on a neat little cap, and as both arms and legs were gone, she hid these deficiencies by folding it in a blanket and devoting her best bed to this chronic invalid. If anyone had known the care lavished on that dolly, I think it would have touched their hearts, even while they laughed. She brought it bits of bouquets, she read to it, took it out to breathe fresh air, hidden under her coat. She sang it lullabies and never went to bed without kissing its dirty face and whispering tenderly, "I hope you'll have a good night, my poor dear." Beth had her troubles as well as the others, and not being an angel, but a very human little girl, she often wept a little weep, as Jo said, because she couldn't take music lessons and have a fine piano. She loved music so dearly, tried so hard to learn, and practiced away so patiently at the jingling old instrument, that it did seem as if someone, not to hint at March, ought to help her. Nobody did, however, and nobody saw Beth wipe the tears off the yellow keys that wouldn't keep in tune when she was all alone. She sang like a little lark about her work, never was too tired for Mommy and the girls, and day after day said hopefully to herself, "I know I'll get my music sometime if I'm good." There are many Beths in the world, shy and quiet, sitting in corners till needed and living for others so cheerfully that no one sees the sacrifices till the little cricket on the hearth stops chirping, and the sweet, sunshiny presence vanishes, leaving silence and shadow behind. If anybody had asked Amy what the greatest trial of her life was, she would have answered at once, "My nose." When she was a baby, Jo had accidentally dropped her into a coal hod, and Amy insisted that the fall had ruined her nose forever. It was not big nor red like poor Patria's. It was only rather flat, and all the pinching in the world could not give it an aristocratic point. No one minded it but herself, and it was doing its best to grow. But Amy felt deeply the want of a Grecian nose, and drew whole sheets of handsome ones to console herself. Little Raphael, as her sisters called her, had a decided talent for drawing, and was never so happy as when copying flowers, designing fairies, or illustrating stories with queer specimens of art. Her teachers complained that instead of doing her sums, she covered her slate with animals. The blank pages of her atlas were used to copy maps on, and caricatures of the most ludicrous description came fluttering out of all her books at unlucky moments. She got through her lessons as well as she could, and managed to escape reprimands by being a model of deportment. She was a great favourite with her mates, being good-tempered and possessing the happy art of pleasing without effort. Her little airs and graces were much admired, so were her accomplishments, for besides her drawing, she could play 12 tunes, crochet, and read French without mispronouncing more than 2/3 of the words. She had a plaintive way of saying, "When Papa was rich, we did so and so," which was very touching, and her long words were considered perfectly elegant by the girls. Amy was in a fair way to be spoiled, for everyone petted her, and her small vanities and selfishnesses were growing nicely. One thing, however, rather quenched the vanities. She had to wear her cousin's clothes. Now Florence's mama hadn't a particle of taste, and Amy suffered deeply at having to wear a red instead of a blue bonnet, unbecoming gowns and fussy aprons that did not fit. Everything was good, well made, and little worn, but Amy's artistic eyes were much afflicted, especially this winter, when her school dress was a dull purple with yellow dots and no trimming. "My only comfort," she said to Meg, with tears in her eyes, "is that Mother doesn't take tucks in my dresses whenever I'm naughty, as Miriam Parks's mother does. My dear, it's really dreadful, for sometimes she is so bad her frock is up to her knees and she can't come to school. When I think of this degradation, I feel that I can bear even my flat nose and purple gown with yellow skyrockets on it." Meg was Amy's confidant and monitor, and by some strange attraction of opposites, Jo was gentle Beth's. To Jo alone did the shy child tell her thoughts, and over a big harum-scarum sister, Beth unconsciously exercised more influence than anyone in the family. The two older girls were a great deal to one another, but each took one of the younger sisters into her keeping and watched over her in her own way, playing mother they called it, and put their sisters in the places of discarded dolls with the maternal instincts of little women. "Has anybody got anything to tell? It's been such a dismal day, I'm really dying for some amusement," said Meg, as they sat sewing together that evening. "I had a queer time with Aunt today, and as I got the best of it, I'll tell you about it," began Jo, who dearly loved to tell stories. "I was reading that everlasting Belsham and droning away as I always do, for Aunt soon drops off, and then I take out some nice book and read like fury till she wakes up. I actually made myself sleepy, and before she began to nod, I gave such a gape that she asked me what I meant by opening my mouth wide enough to take the whole book in at once. I wish I could and be done with it," said I, trying not to be saucy. Then she gave me a long lecture on my sins and told me to sit and think them over, while she just lost herself for a moment. She never finds herself very soon, so the minute her cap began to bob like a top-heavy dahlia, I whipped the Vicar of Wakefield out of my pocket and read away, with one eye on him and one on Aunt. I just got to where they all tumbled into the water when I forgot and laughed out loud. Aunt woke up and, being more good-natured after a nap, told me to read a bit and show what frivolous work I preferred to the worthy and instructive Belsham. I did my very best and she liked it, though she only said, "I don't understand what it's all about. Go back and begin it, child." Back I went and made the primroses as interesting as ever I could. Once I was wicked enough to stop in a thrilling place and say meekly, "I'm afraid it tires you, ma'am. Shan't I stop now?" She caught up her knitting, which had dropped out of her hands, gave me a sharp look through her specs, and said in her short way, "Finish the chapter and don't be impertinent, miss." "Did she own she liked it?" asked Meg. "Oh, bless you, no. But she let old Belsham rest, and when I ran back after my gloves this afternoon, there she was, so hard at the vicar that she didn't hear me laugh as I danced a jig in the hall because of the good time coming. What a pleasant life she might have if only she chose. I don't envy her much, in spite of her money, for after all, rich people have about as many worries as poor ones, I think," added Jo. And with that insight, I'm going to reserve judgment on it. I think we're going to leave it for tonight. If you want to pick up where we left off, you can find Little Women practically everywhere, including and on Project Gutenberg, at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepytime Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get new episodes whenever they come out. Reminder that the music for tonight is Un Désert by Kumiko. Check out more of their work on their website, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night and sweet dreams.